Hi, my name is William Boatwright. I'm in Southern California today to talk about a body of water you may have never heard of or ever seen. I'm standing on top of Obsidian Butte in Southern California, and behind me is the Salton Sea, California's largest lake. Now, this lake was once a popular tourist spot. There's a lot of local businesses, a booming economy, and a plethora of individuals living in the local communities. Now, this unintentional lake, as beautiful as it is, has a lot of issues associated with it. These issues stem from the ecosystem all the way to public health risks with the individuals still living in the community. Now, to understand how this unintentional lake has unintentional problems, I'm gonna have to take you back in the past, and we're gonna work our way to 2020 to understand how we have these problems and maybe how we could fix these problems.
Now, using Google Earth, we're going to look at the Salton Sea and piece together the history of the Salton Sea. As you can see, the Salton Sea is located in Southern California, the United States, right above Mexico. Now, the Salton Sea sits in an area that geologists call the Salton Trough. Not to get too much into the tectonics, but basically there's some separation going on that's creating the Gulf of California. And the cool thing about the Gulf of California is it actually used to run up through Mexico and fill the area that's known as the Salton Trough. Now, the ocean itself was blocked off by sediment deposits from the Colorado River. So for a brief part of the history of the Salton Trough, it was just dry and desert. And it wasn't until 1905 that catastrophic flooding at the Colorado River refilled the sea and actually created two rivers, the Alamo River and the New River. All right, we're now looking at the south part of the Salton Sea. And as you can see, on the right here, we have the Alamo River. And on the left here, we have the New River. Now, these rivers formed after the flooding, like I said, but the flooding actually occurred for about 2 years before they got it under control. Using Google, you could even look back in time and find images like these two I found and see how catastrophic the flooding actually was. Now, although the flooding was accidental, the conditions for the Salton Sea to form were just right, and people saw the Salton Sea as a miracle of the desert. Places like Bombay Beach saw huge spikes in tourism. The sea was visited by famous actors and politicians. It was a place where somebody wanted to start their small business or build their home. The Salton Sea was the place to be for a short amount of time. People would visit the beaches at the sea, and they'd be littered with dead fish. They'd look out in the water and they'd see dead birds. The Salton Sea even had a famous odor. It became known as a stinky place. The more the Salton Sea was viewed this negatively, the less tourism they saw. Local businesses failed and were abandoned. Today, there's only a small population of individuals still living around the sea. And today, it is still seen as a toxic, disgusting place. What we're looking at here is a report from California's Legislative Analyst's Office, and I wanted to include Figure 3 in this report because I actually think it does a really good job at laying out the timeline and catching us up to 2020, where we're at today. And it has some significant events that we've already talked about, like 1905, the origin of the sea. But it also has some other interesting events, like in 1950, how they introduced saltwater game, and this increased recreational activity, and that's why you saw the boom in tourism. But it also has shocking statistics, like how 7.6 million fish died in one day in 1999, all from oxygen depletion.
Once the Salton Sea got its bad reputation, the local community lost tourism. With the hit to the economy in the local area, businesses like the one on my right here had to close. If you hopped in a car and you drove around the Salton Sea, you would see it's littered with abandoned businesses and homes. Even with all the issues I just told you about, there are still individuals living in small communities, like here at Bombay Beach.
Why does the Salton Sea have these issues? What are the issues? More importantly, what drives the problems associated with the Salton Sea?
Due to climate change and drought, the amount of water that comes in from the Colorado River to California is way lower, by about 8%. Behind me is the Alamo River. Due to these changes, the amount of water flowing into the sea is extremely less, lowering the volume of the sea itself. Behind me is the New River. Now, this river has a reputation. It's known as America's most polluted river. It's shared with the United States and Mexico. This river is full of all kinds of different pesticides, chemicals, and even sewage runoff. Now, the Salton Sea is dependent on both this river and the Alamo River, which we were just at. But this isn't the only source of water going into the sea. Now, the New River and Alamo River do fill the sea, but it's not the only thing. This is agricultural runoff, and this is filling the sea right now as we speak. And actually, agricultural runoff is responsible for most of the water going into the Salton Sea. Historically, there's been issues with not only the water being introduced, but different pesticides and fertilizers, which causes another issue. California's gotten better at regulating this, but there's an historic amount of pollutants that has entered this water through agricultural runoff. Not only that, the amount of water from agricultural runoff is a lot lower. Farmers have gotten more efficient at water conservation. Now, as you decrease the amount of water coming into the Salton Sea, it's not only going to decrease the volume, but it's actually going to move the sea back quite a bit. As you can see, the edge of the sea is right here in 2020. And if you pan to my left, you're going to see that the sea has moved hundreds and hundreds of yards from its original position. Now, sure, it does decrease the volume, but it also increases the salinity. This increased salinity results in the Salton Sea having more salt content than the Pacific Ocean.
The Salton Sea is 50% saltier than the Pacific Ocean. There is no outlet for the sea. Evaporation is the only way water can exit the sea. This means the deposited salt is left behind with nowhere to go. There's more information on this on California's Legislative Analyst's Office.gov website. If you want to learn more, use the provided link below. The link will also be in the description of this video.
I am now standing on the exposed dry lake bed of the Salton Sea. As the water gets depleted, actually more of this lake bed will be exposed. Now, the reason this is an issue is because the high salt levels, the chemicals we talked about, and even the pollutants from places like the New River get locked into this lake bed. Now, as winds pick up in the area, these particulates get in the air and become an inhalation hazard for the local community.
Definition: particulates. PM stands for particulate matter. This is also called particle pollution. This is a term for a mixture of solid particles and liquid droplets found in the air. These particulates are so small they enter deep in the lungs and potentially the bloodstream. Long-term risks can be reduced lung function, development of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, increased rate of disease progression, reduction in life expectancy. This definition was provided by the Environmental Protection Agency.gov website. If you want to learn more, use the link provided below. This link will also be in the description of this video.
Now, this dry lake bed does create its own issues, but now I'm about to show you why the agricultural runoff causes a different problem in the sea itself. While visiting the Salton Sea today, there's been a lingering odor in the air, and as I get closer to this body of water, it's actually getting exacerbated. Well, this famous smell is actually hydrogen sulfide. Now, as organic matter decays, like the algae we're about to see, this hydrogen sulfide gets released in the air. Although smelly, this is not the biggest problem with the algae in the water. Before we look at the algal blooms in the Salton Sea, I want to talk a little bit about why the agricultural runoff coming in is a problem. Now, we already said that the agricultural runoff introduces different chemicals into the lake. Well, chemicals like phosphorus and nitrogen that are in the fertilizers in the runoff actually work as like a steroid for different plant life. Now, you may be thinking, that's good, we want plants to grow. But you're going to see in a second why this excess growth can make the Salton Sea eutrophic.
Definition: eutrophication. Eutrophication is a natural process that results from the accumulation of nutrients in lakes or other bodies of water. Plants like algae grow excessively because of the nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. The excessive amount of algae then dies off. This decaying organic matter can affect the quality of water and create odors. When the algae die, they consume the oxygen in the water. With the lack of oxygen in the water, fish can die. The agricultural runoff deposited in the Salton Sea can exacerbate the eutrophication by increasing the rate at which nutrients enter the water. This definition was provided by the United States Geological Survey.gov website. If you want to learn more about this, please use the link provided below. This link will also be in the description of this video.
So we happen to be out here in a time of year where the algae bloom to my left is pretty thick. As you can see, it creates a layer on top of the water. It works as a shield. It can deprive the bottom plants from photosynthesis, and when the algae die and decompose, it actually consumes the oxygen that's in the water. As the oxygen levels lower, the fish will die and float to the surface. But that's not the only problem. There is a lack of diversity in the species of fish. There is a huge population, but disease is prevalent. As these fish float to the surfaces, the birds over here to my right will eat the dead carcasses. After eating these dead carcasses, some of these birds will get sick and die. This is one of the main reasons people think of the Salton Sea as a gross place. The sides of the beach will be littered with dead fish and dead birds. With all the individuals that still live in all these small communities around the Salton Sea, you may think that they're crazy for living here. Maybe they stay here because they think that the Salton Sea will be back to its former glory, or maybe it's because the state of California has made promises to fix the issues.
I am once again referencing the Legislative Analyst Report, and this comes from California's Legislative Analyst Office. And this is a nonpartisan office, and their job is to provide fiscal and policy information, and this specific document's looking at the Salton Sea. And as you go through this document, it looks like it's all good information. Millions of dollars being allocated to the Salton Sea from the state and federal governments and even some local entities. But when you break it down, like in Figure 7, you see that the funding is just for Salton Sea mitigation and management. It's just to manage the sea and mitigate the problems. There's no solution in this document. There's no money allocated to fixing the issues with the Salton Sea. Now, I understand that it's expensive. Introducing a new water source would cost billions of dollars. And the state of California couldn't do that on their own. I don't see that happening actually without some private sector money, or maybe just a bigger role from the federal government. To fix these issues, it's going to take more than just one state. Now, the Salton Sea does have a lot of problems, but there's no one fix for these problems. Honestly, it's hard to see a solution for the Salton Sea without introducing a different source or a new source of water and having an outlet for the sea. Now, the state of California has made promises to mitigate the problems that are associated with the Salton Sea, but it's larger than California. The issues associated with the Colorado River is a multi-state issue, and there's even international issues in between the United States and Mexico, and the pollution going on in the New River. Human-caused climate change is only going to exacerbate the shrinking of the sea. As more lake bed gets exposed, the inhalation hazards are not just going to be felt around the Salton Sea. They're going to plague the communities further out from the sea. Now, I feel if the federal government invests in not just mitigating, but fixing these issues, the Salton Sea could be a popular place that can generate revenue once again. They could save lives. They can help the local ecosystem. I understand that the price tag is in the billions, but I feel that the federal government has a responsibility to fix these problems. The state of California is doing their part to an extent. Maybe they can do more. Maybe some individuals in the private sector can help out. But the federal government can fix this problem. And just because they can fix this problem, I think they should fix this problem.
Today we talked a lot about the problems associated with the Salton Sea. But the last thing I want to do is make you think the Salton Sea is a disgusting, nasty place you can't even visit. It's untrue. It's a wonderful place. And there's actually plenty of stuff to do around here. It's just an unintentional sea with unintentional problems. And you can't blame one individual. It's not the farmer's fault who's just trying to make a living. It's not the state of California's fault, the country of Mexico. It's nobody's fault. There's just problems. And we can fix these problems. It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be cheap. But I believe that this sea can be cleaned up. These issues can be fixed. We can mitigate the shrinking of the sea. And it can be a popular tourist spot like it once was. So this video wasn't meant to be negative. I actually just want to address these issues so something positive can come out of it. Thank you for watching this video.